The violent content of video games have been debated since decades, but you cannot deny the sheer entertainment of unabashed gory and graphic violence that usually comes with the fighting games, or full-on action and horror games. Even the current rating system that decides which games are appropriate is not free from controversies. But back in the PlayStation era, we had some classics that got away with a lot more than what would be permissible today. In this video, I will list out some of these PlayStation games that had loads of violent kills in the most innovative ways, and the censor police could not contain the popularity of these titles. Mortal Kombat Trilogy, 1996. This game was released as the second and final update to Mortal Kombat 3, and it became a standout hit for the PlayStation. While it features a similar and basic gameplay system with the same story as Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, there are a few new characters and stages added to the mix. The game does not have its own unique storyline. Instead, it serves as a compilation and expansion of the stories from Mortal Kombat, Mortal Kombat 2, and Mortal Kombat 3, bringing together all characters and stages from these games into a single title. The central narrative covers Earthrealm's warriors, led by Liu Kang, Raiden, and their allies, competing in brutal tournaments against the forces of Outworld to prevent Emperor Shao Kahn from conquering and merging their worlds. This installment introduced the brutality mechanic, which was extremely popular among the fans. Many had regarded this as the best Mortal Kombat game, and the impressive amount of content and absence of load times contributed to this legacy. I was a huge fan of the accurate recreation of the arcade game's graphics, and the addition of the aggressor meter helped the gameplay. The fighters and the limitless carnage was a treat to witness, and some sound glitches aside, the game was a solid effort. The finishing moves and kills were quite graphic, and it retained the intensity and gory bits of the Mortal Kombat franchise. Overall, Mortal Kombat Trilogy played a huge role in recreating the fan base of this fighting game series, and there weren't many better games for the PlayStation in this genre. Resident Evil, 1996. This survival horror game, developed and published by Capcom, quickly became one of the greatest games in the genre, and the Resident Evil franchise was up and running very soon. The story is set in the fictional Arkley Mountain region in the Midwest, and the player takes control of Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, who are members of an elite task force. They find themselves in a situation where they have to escape from a mysterious mansion that is infested with zombies and other creatures. Through the gameplay, more sinister details about the mansion are revealed, and the task force members also find the secrets about the organization that is behind it all. The game became an international bestseller in no time, and the gamers couldn't get enough of this fascinating experience. The graphics were absolutely stellar, which gelled perfectly with the spooky atmosphere of the game. The gameplay was smooth and perfectly curated to make sure that you would be glued to the screen the whole time, and the only complaint about the game was that the voice acting was below par. Someone described this game as something that was just as entertaining to watch as it was to play, and nothing could be more accurate. The heavy challenge of combat and puzzles made the game terrifying and engaging, and even the horror cliches were fun. It is not surprising that the game sold over 4 million copies. Resident Evil is still regarded as one of the greatest video games ever made, so you can understand the impact that it had on the gaming community during the late 90s. Resident Evil 2, 1998. After the overwhelming success of Resident Evil, Capcom emerged with a sequel within 2 years, and this time, the excitement around the game was insane. This third-person survival horror game features the same basic gameplay as its predecessor, and the story is set in Raccoon City, the fictional town in the Arklay Mountains. You can pick from two protagonists, the rookie police officer Leon S. Kennedy or the college student Claire Redfield. They both attempt to survive a terrible zombie outbreak in the city, and the player can explore Raccoon City while fending off the monsters and solving puzzles. The expectations were high, and Resident Evil 2 did not disappoint the fans. The ambience was spine-chilling as expected, and the graphics remained the showstopper. Much like the first game, the audio for this one was considerably improved, and even though the controls weren't the best, there weren't many complaints about the gameplay. The level of detail was remarkable, and the suspenseful story only added to the gaming experience. Resident Evil 2 had the most precise and realistic sound design for a console game back in the day, and the massive length of the game meant that you could relish the experience for much longer. The player character was equipped with firearms, but there was limited ammunition, which required some tactical moves to combat the enemies. You sometimes had to evade encounters in order to sustain yourself longer. In a nutshell, this was the perfect sequel to a perfect game, and even today, you will enjoy the smooth and engaging gameplay that it offers. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, 1999. The third game in the Resident Evil franchise came shortly after the second, and even the storyline takes place concurrently with the events of Resident Evil 2. Here, the player assumes control of the former elite agent Jill Valentine as she escapes Raccoon City that has been overrun by zombies. Much of the gameplay is similar to its predecessor, and the 3D models over pre-rendered backgrounds look familiar. The choices that you make in the gameplay affect how the overall story unfolds, and there are multiple endings based on that. The detailed graphics and the haunting settings of this game could be intimidating, and it was both a critical and commercial success, selling over 3 million copies worldwide. I think the players would have loved for the game to be longer, but nobody had complaints about the story. The gameplay was smooth and sophisticated, and the third installment preserved the best features of its predecessors and added some exciting new elements as well. I loved the introduction of Nemesis in the gameplay, a creature that pursued the player throughout the game, and this was inspired by the T-1000 Terminator from the 1991 film Judgment Day. The 3D modeling of Jill Valentine was also quite realistic, and visually, the game was probably the best among the first three. If you have never played this game, you have missed out on a classic that dictated the survival horror genre during the time. Loaded, 1995. This was a sci-fi themed top-down multi-directional shooter developed by Gremlin Interactive that had origins in DC Comics and Vertigo Comics. The story takes you on a journey as 6 unlikely anti-heroes and villains are the ones who must stop the powerful supervillain Fub to save the universe. These 6 saviors of the universe included perverts, psychopaths, mutants, and murderers, but they are the need of the hour. Even the character of the supervillain is quite interesting, as he went from being a crazy catering officer with the Marines to a maniac who wanted to conquer the universe. And all the characters were created and designed by Garth Ennis and Greg Staples. Loaded has levels across 15 different worlds, and there are 6 playable characters as the story suggests. Each mission starts off with a quick briefing, followed by a full-motion video sequence, and the cinematic presentation is quite interesting. I enjoy the puzzle and exploration elements in the game, but nothing matches up with the violent kills that you can execute here. The overblown carnage makes it a blast to play, and even though it lacks strategy, you will not be complaining about that. The graphics deserve to be appreciated for the strong details, and the smooth gameplay is the icing on the cake. Even the soundtrack is well thought and executed, and Loaded has to be one of my favorite guilty pleasures when it comes to the violent PlayStation games. Reloaded, 1996. The sequel to Loaded dropped within a year, and this sci-fi themed top-down shooter featured the same game engine as the original. Reloaded brings back the familiar antagonist Fub, whose body had been destroyed at the end of the previous game, but his brain fled in an escape pod and landed on a harsh desert world. Now, his brain has been implanted in a new body, and the murderous rampage begins as he assumes a new name, Cheb. It is up to the bloodthirsty anti-heroes once again to bring him down permanently, especially after he plans to expand his empire one more time. The game wasn't the best follow-up in the gaming industry, and most people seem to think that Reloaded was poorly and hastily made. The game did have more complex level designs and rendered graphics, but the frantic action is missing. There were some gory kills and violent moments, but the predecessor set the standards pretty high. Reloaded also had a slower pace and a more puzzle-driven approach, which were not exactly what the thrill seekers were looking for. As IGN pointed out, almost every great aspect of the original game had been compromised, and you could only stay there for the blood and guts. With all said and done, however, if you don't mind a mindless action game that promises loads of graphic violence, this might not be a terrible game to pass the time. Nightmare Creatures, 1997. Nightmare Creatures was a survival horror game developed by Callisto Entertainment for PlayStation, and it became such a hit with the gamers that a couple of sequels were soon on the way. The story draws from the gothic horror elements of the 19th century, and it starts off with a devil-worshipping cult called the Brotherhood of Hecate, who conducted some sinister experiments back in 1666. However, the experiment created some hideous monsters called nightmare creatures, and the cult decided to use these creatures as an army of conquest. The narrative then jumps to 1834, London, where several evil occurrences plague the city. Can the evil cult and their humanity-threatening creatures be stopped before it is too late? There were several reasons that contributed to the massive commercial success of this game. Firstly, the spooky atmosphere was exactly what the horror fans were looking for. The monster designs were very impressive, and the overall gaming experience was among the best during the time. It is not that the game did not have any flaws, because the controls were quite clunky. The camera could frustrate the player with a poor view of all the action, and some even complained that the fighting and gameplay got old very quickly. But the positives outweigh the negatives like any good video game, and the game promised to be a lot of fun for those who dared to enter the nightmarish world. This is one game that gave me several nightmares, where the creatures would haunt me, and I wouldn't mind trying it out all over again, even today. Dino Crisis, 1999. If you are a dinosaur game fan, there is a good chance that Dino Crisis or its sequel once featured on your playlist. The survival horror game developed and published by Capcom was one of its kind, and the game even had an intriguing story. The plot revolved around Regina, who was a special operations agent named Regina, who was sent with a team to investigate a secluded island research facility. When she arrived, she found out that the place had been overrun with dinosaurs. She now had to escape alive with her team, but not before discovering the sinister secrets of the facility. The game feels fresh and unique because it uses an original real-time engine with 3D environments instead of the pre-rendered backgrounds of the Resident Evil games that came before it. The gameplay has some traditional survival horror mechanics that involves both action and puzzles. The dinosaurs in question are quick, intelligent, and violent, and indeed, The game was more panic horror than survival horror. The gameplay can test your nerves as well as your skills, and the violent kills only add to the charm of it all. The violent and fast-paced game provided enough adrenaline rush, and the backgrounds and visuals were stunning, to say the least. Even the dinosaur sound effects were nicely done. Dino Crisis became such a huge hit that it sold nearly 2.5 million copies in no time. People were comparing this with the legendary Resident Evil, and some even dubbed it as Resident Evil with dinosaurs. Dino Crisis 2, 2000. The dinosaur madness was back with Dino Crisis 2, and I was delighted after the amazing experience with the first one. The story here introduced the special operatives Regina and Dylan Morton are sent to investigate a catastrophic time accident caused by experimental third energy technology, which displaces a research base, military facility, and town into the dinosaur-infested Cretaceous period, creating a jungle in their place. Their mission is to recover vital research data and rescue survivors. As Regina and Dylan fight their way through hordes of dinosaurs and mysterious helmeted attackers, they discover the disaster's origins in a failed Noah's Ark plan to save Earth's history. Dylan learns that a mute girl he encounters is his future daughter, Paula. Ultimately, Regina escapes with the research data to try to save everybody, while Dylan stays behind with Paula as the facility explodes, hoping they might yet be rescued at another point in time. The legacy of the Dino Crisis franchise probably comes from the fact that even the sequel maintained the standard set by the original. The continuation of the story of the character Regina is a nice touch, and the game brings in more of an arcade-style action element. There are a wide variety of weapons, and I think even the number of enemies that appear on screen are greater and of a wider variety. The game is set in a jungle, which is an idea that was scrapped from the first game due to technical limitations. And visually, this will be an unforgettable experience. I really like how the game avoids the stereotypes of the genre, and it delivers one of the most refreshing takes on action-adventure genre that deserves to be celebrated even today. Wu-Tang, Shaolin Style, 1999. This game tells the story of a group of martial artists studying under Master Shin, who is the last practitioner of the ancient kung fu discipline of Wu-Tang. You have a small army of warriors practicing martial arts under the guidance of Mong Ju. He then reveals his plans to discover the secrets of Wu-Tang from Master Shin, who is discovered to be hiding out on Staten Island in New York. If he learns it all, he will have the power to control the world. When Master Shin is captured by Mong Ju's henchmen, the Wu-Tang clan vows to track them down and rescue their master. Thus begins the mayhem and action-packed showdown in order to save the world. The game with so much blood and violence that a special code had to be printed on the instruction manual, and it had to be entered to witness the full, uncensored action. The fighting engine of this game was a cut above the rest, and it also had an amazing soundtrack. You don't necessarily have any Tekken-like technique involved, but that does not dull the gameplay. It was the first 4-player fighter on the PlayStation, and the brutal action and unique kills made it worth the time. The story mode is so interesting that it almost feels cinematic, and the boss fights are quite remarkable as well. Back in the day, if you could get a few friends together, you could have some good old Shaolin-style fun. Evil Dead, Hail to the King, 2000. The game acts as a sequel to the 1992 film Army of Darkness, and this is the second video game released that was based on the Evil Dead film franchise. Hail to the King was developed by Heavy Iron Studios and published by THQ, and the game takes place 8 years after the events of Army of Darkness. Ash Williams regains his job at S-Mart and starts a new life and even a new relationship with his coworker Jenny. But his recurrent nightmares continue to trouble him. He still dreams about the Necronomicon and the Deadites, and Jenny wants to help him and takes him back to Professor Nobi's old cabin in the woods. What is unleashed next is a series of terrifying events, starting from Ash's evil twin, Bad Ash, and other monstrosities that come after them. While the PlayStation version of this game was not disappointing by any means, the same cannot be said for the Dreamcast and PC versions that had stagnant and lifeless graphics. The game also needed better control to become one of the best in the genre, because the violent kills alone did not do the trick in 2000 with all the competition around. The storyline was intriguing, but the same could not be said about the horror elements that failed to instill fear in the gamers. All in all, this was a decent effort that was more about grabbing the hype around the franchise than attempting a game that could revolutionize horror. Tenchu, Stealth Assassins, 1998. The intense story of the game is set in Sengoku-era Japan, and it follows the Azuma clan ninjas Rikimaru and Ayame as they undertake covert missions for the benevolent Lord Goda, tackling corrupt officials and violent threats to his province. As they complete their assignments, they uncover a sinister plot led by the dark ninja Anakage, who serves the resurrected evil sorcerer, Lord Mei-O. The story escalates when Anakage orchestrates the kidnapping of Lord Goda's daughter, Princess Kiku, using attacks and distractions to throw the heroes off. Ultimately, Rikimaru and Ayame battle Anakage several times before a final confrontation against Lord Mei-O in his cavern lair, where Rikimaru sacrifices himself to save Ayame and Kiku from the collapsing hideout, concluding a tale of sacrifice, loyalty, and shadowy warfare. This is a game that proved the gaming community that it takes more than just dark clothes and sharp throwing objects to make it look like a ninja game. I find the stealth techniques that are required in the gameplay to be quite interesting. And someone rightly said in the review of this game that it is the perfect game to pull off the long nights. The fight sequences are unforgettable, especially the kills that really stand out. Moreover, the game promises some stellar graphics that make the sharp visuals add to the gaming experience. It is not surprising that the game sold millions of copies and quickly became a standout hit, and it spawned a video game franchise that is regarded highly even today. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, 1999. The game takes place in the fictional world of Nosgoth, and here, the health of the land is tied to the 9 pillars of Nosgoth. Each of these pillars is represented by a guardian, and before the events of the game, the guardians become corrupt. Kain killed 8 of them, and realized that he was the final one, but he refused to sacrifice himself to restore the pillars. Nosgoth was doomed, and Kain raised his vampire generals to siege the land. The vampires become the dominant species of the land, and humans have been decimated. But underneath the surface remains the Elder God who controls the Wheel of Fate, and things are about to change. The player assumes control of Raziel, a disfigured vampire, and it is one for the fantasy lovers. The puzzles on this game are quite difficult, and I am a huge fan of the dark and gothic atmosphere that the game delivers. The cutscenes are iconic and help in understanding the overall story, and everyone loves the engaging storyline that is almost straight out of Tolkien's lore. The developers ran out of money midway through the making of this game, and I wonder how amazing the game would have looked if they actually got the right budget. If you want to experience the most fascinating wasteland ever, you need to revisit this PlayStation classic. Bofreaks, 1998. This 3D fighting video game is set in a near future where the United States has fallen apart due to fierce competition and wars between huge corporations called GI Corps. The country breaks into private territories called Neo-America. To avoid more violence and decide who controls what, the Secret Games Commission organizes a fighting tournament. Each GI Corp picks a champion called a Bofreak, a bionically enhanced fighter made to battle for control of the land. These champions are part machine, part living beings, and each has their own reasons for fighting. Some want freedom from the corporations controlling them, while others are loyal to their sponsors. The Bofreaks fight in brutal matches using weapons and cybernetic powers. Deep down, some of them dream of being free or even human. The tournament is not just a fight, but a way to decide the future of Neo-America. I think that Bofreaks is a visually impressive fighting game for its time, notable for its detailed character models, fluid animations, and unique gore mechanics like losing limbs that affect gameplay. The game features 3D arenas with multi-level combat and the ability to hover, adding a dynamic element not common in fighters then. However, its fighting system is considered less refined and sometimes encourages repetitive projectile battles. The game lacks depth in modes and story, leading to limited replayability and a steep difficulty curve after early matches. Fans appreciate its campy characters and brutal violence, but some of you might not appreciate the repetitive nature of the gameplay. Parasite Eve. Aya Bria, a rookie NYPD officer, attends an opera in New York on Christmas Eve, 1997. Suddenly, the audience bursts into flames while an actress called Melissa transforms into the powerful being Eve. Eve can control mitochondria and wants to evolve a new dominant life form by causing mass deaths. Aya, immune to Eve's power, chases her across the city. Together with her partner Daniel and scientist Maeda, Aya learns about her own mitochondrial gifts and their link to her sister. As Eve mutates creatures and kills many people, Aya faces her in several fights, trying to stop the birth of the ultimate being. Aya succeeds, destroying both Eve and the ultimate being, saving New York. In the end, Aya discovers her special powers came from a tragic accident that connected her fate to Eve's. Parasite Eve is praised for its unique blend of horror, science fiction, and RPG elements, and I strongly agree that it deserves all the appreciation. The game delivers an eerie atmosphere set in 1990s New York, with a memorable story driven by strong characters and cinematic moments. Yes, I always thought that the story could be made into a fine movie. As for the combat, it combines real-time and turn-based mechanics that keep battles exciting and tactical. The visuals and music add to the tension, making the experience immersive and suspenseful. Some players find the inventory system and movement a bit dated, but the game stands out for its originality and gripping plot. Overall, Parasite Eve is a classic that balances chills and action for fans of thrilling RPGs. Marvelous verdict. Nothing makes violent games more exciting than graphic kills. If you are into the thrill-seeking ride courtesy of an action-packed fighting game or a horror game, you don't want to be messing around without the gory and graphic kills to make things exciting. This is where games like these have established themselves as the best sellers because the gamers couldn't get enough of the innovative kills that were provided in them. The trend remains even today, but while the modern games are probably more appealing in terms of the technical advancements, the old-school charm of these PlayStation-era classics can never be forgotten. Many of these games are relevant even today, and I have nothing but fond memories whenever I think of these titles. Do let me know in the comments below which one of these games had the most innovative and thrilling kills for you, filled with blood and violence. Also, feel free to add any other titles that you think should have made the list.